Welcome to Data Guy, the channel dedicated to helping you unlock the power of data.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video, we're going to see one of the most important functions in SQL, that is the having clause. Okay. Have you ever written a SQL query and thought, why can't I use where with count or sum? Or maybe when you do use the aggregate functions like sum or count in the where clause, it gives you error. Why? That's exactly where having clause comes in. And today I'll show you when to use having, how it works, and how is it different from where clause in simple real world examples. Okay. Now let's go to the introduction to having clause. So far we have learned how to filter data using where clause, but where works only on individual rows. That is, where works before the grouping happens. Okay. But what if you want to filter the data after summarization or grouping? For example, department with more than 5 employees, or when you want to find product with total sales greater than 1 lakh, or if you want to find the customers whose average order value is high. This is where having clause is used. Okay. So let me explain you what is having. The having clause is used to filter group data. Okay, meaning it works after aggregate functions like count, sum, average, min and max. So like in simple words, where will filter rows and having filters groups. That is basically summarized data. Okay. Now let me explain the syntax. When you write the SQL query, we should always follow the syntax, and the syntax starts with the select statement. It will have the aggregate function and with the column name in it, and also the non-aggregated columns will be mentioned. Then we have the from clause. From will have the name of the table from which we're going to retrieve the data. Then we will have the group by clause with the column name mentioned, and then we have the having with the condition. Okay. Notice something important here: the having clause comes after the group by, not before. Okay. So now let's see what exactly happens behind the scenes. Okay. This is the order of execution I'm saying. So the syntax is one thing, but the order of execution is different. Okay. The order of execution, the from clause will be executed from the query. That is, the SQL fetches the data from the table. Okay. Then the where clause will be executed. If you have mentioned any filter in the where clause, that will be executed. That is, it will filter the rows before grouping. Okay. Then the group by clause will be executed. That is, it will group whatever rows have been filtered out. It will be grouped together based on the aggregated function. Okay. Then followed by the aggregate function, calculations like sum or count will happen. Then having clause will be executed, because whatever data which has been grouped with the aggregate function, it will filter the grouped results based on the condition which was given. Okay. Then at the end, select statement will be executed, which is basically we need to choose what to display. Okay, we don't want all the columns in the table to be displayed. We just want only the required columns which we have mentioned in the select clause, that will be displayed. Okay. Then it will followed by the order by clause, which is basically to sort the results. Then offset for skipping rows, and limit to limits the output rows. Okay. So that's why having can use aggregate function, because it runs after aggregation. Okay. Because where will only filter rows, but having will filter based on aggregate function. Okay. That's the reason it is running after the aggregation. If you see here, group by aggregate function, then only having comes. Having doesn't come before the group by. If it comes before the group by like where clause, it cannot basically filter as per the aggregate function, because the aggregation itself didn't happen if it comes before group by. Okay. That's the reason it comes after the group by and aggregate function, so that the filter function can perform based on the condition with the aggregate function. Okay. Now let's make this crystal clear. I'll just show you an example and I'll explain you this. Okay. We have to find the average amount spent on each market date. Okay. And we want to consider only those days where the number of purchases were more than 3 and every single transaction amount must be greater than 5. Okay. Hope you understand this. We have to find the average amount spent on each market date. So we need market date and the average amount. Okay. But they have given two conditions, that we want to consider only those days where the number of purchases were more than 3. Okay. And every single transaction amount must be greater than 5. Okay. There are two conditions. Okay. Now first, let's display the customer purchases table to understand the data. So like I said, we need the market date and we need the average amount. You can calculate by multiplying quantity with the cost to customer per quantity. Okay, it will be done. But to implement the filter, we want to consider only those days where the number of purchases were more than 3. Okay. How you can see, because here from the table one row is considered as one purchase. Okay. So for example, here on 3rd of July, customer ID 14 has made 2 purchases because there are 2 rows in this. Okay. And we want to display only the purchases which were more than 3. Okay. So in that case, 3rd July has how many purchases? 1 2 3 4 5. 5 purchases are there. So this market date will be displayed. And also every single transaction amount must be greater than 5. That is, the transaction amount is basically quantity into cost to customer per quantity. When you multiply this, the amount should be more than 5. Then only it will get displayed. Okay. Now let's write the query. Like I said, we need the market date. Then we need the average amount spent. So we'll write quantity into cost to customer as average amount from customer purchases. Okay. We'll go step by step. I'll get the first, I won't use any filter, that is having clause or where clause. We'll just display the summarized result. Okay. Group by market date. Okay. Now let's execute this. Now we have market date and the average amount. Okay. Now let's insert the conditions. Okay. We'll use having. Okay. The first condition is we want to consider only those days where number of purchases were more than 3. Okay. As I said, one row is considered as one purchase. So what we can do is we can use the count star function and we'll make it as greater than 3. Okay. Now if you run this query, there's a change. So only these market date has more than 3 purchases. Okay. Now the second one, every single transaction must be greater than 5. Okay. So here they're saying every single transaction. So we should not filter this after grouping. We should filter this before the grouping happens from the base table. So what we can do, after the from clause, just insert the where clause and do an inline calculation, quantity into cost to customer per quantity. This gives the total amount. Total amount should be greater than 5. Okay. So if you see, the first what will happen, first it will select the table from which we need to deliver the retrieve the data. Then it will implement the where clause, where it will calculate the amount, and only the amount which is greater than 5 will be filtered out to the next step. Okay. Hence we have Hence we have ensured that this condition is met. Then after the where, it will implement the group by. Okay, so group by market data and the aggregate function will be executed, and then having will execute. Okay, after grouping, which all market date has purchases more than 3, only that will get filtered out with this clause. Okay, then the select statement will execute to ensure that what we want to display, it gets displayed. Okay, now let us run this. So this is the actual result. We just include an order by market date ascending. Okay, now let's run this. Fine. So on 3rd April 2019, the average amount spent by the customer is 13.8. On 6th April, it is 15.4. On 10th April, it is 15.3. So likewise, we will get the insight. Okay, so this is one example. In days to come, we will try a lot of example which has both where and having, and this having clause will be most useful when you start learning about joins and window function. Okay, so before you go to the advanced level, advanced topics such as joins and windows function, it is better for you all to understand what is having clause, how it is used, how it works, how it is different from where clause. I mean, when to use where and when to use having. We should be clear about that, and before we step into the advanced topic. Okay, now let me explain you what is the difference between where and having, so that you'll have an idea. Okay, so this is a basic difference between where and having, and also this is one of the most asked SQL interview questions. Okay, if you want to crack a SQL interview, you need to know this. Okay, now let's start. Now, where and having difference. Okay, like I said, where will filter rows, having will filter the groups. Okay, and where is used before the group by. Okay, and having is used after group by, because having filters the summarized result. Okay, and where cannot use aggregate function. Like I said, after the from, where will get executed, so we cannot use aggregate function in where. And having, we can use aggregate function because it filters the aggregated results. That's right. And where actually improves performance by reducing the rows early, and having filters the summarized results. Okay, so this is the difference between them. Next, to summarize what we have learned, use where to filter raw data and use having to filter the summarized data. Okay, and having always works after group by and aggregate function.
If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the Data Guy channel.